Welcome to this Quantum Security and Defense presentation, overview of legal issues for quantum industries. And thank you for being a valued member of our community. Dr. Ingo Bauermann is a founding partner of BHO Legal, a boutique technology law firm based in Cologne, Germany. He specializes in national, European, and international high technology projects, mostly in the space industry. His clients include leading stakeholders such as the European Commission, European Space Agency, German Space Agency, large satellite operators, SME, and new space startups. Dr. Bauermann studied law in Münster and Cologne. He received his PhD from the famous Cologne Institute for Air and Space Law under Prof. Dr. Hobe on the international law of satellite communications. From 2001 to 2007, Dr. Bauermann was in-house lawyer at the German Aerospace Center, DLR. He was then head of DLR's Galileo Program Office and administrative CEO of the DLR Gesellschaft für Raumfahrtanwendungen MBH, an affiliate of DLR for the establishment and operations of the German Galileo Control Center. Dr. Bauermann is member of the International Institute of Space Law, IICEL, and the European Centre for Space Law, ECSL. He acts as mentor for space startups within Space Founders, the French Starburst Blast, and other accelerators and incubators. He chairs the legal/regulatory working group of the BDI New Space Initiative and organises yearly legal sessions or workshops at the Munich New Space Summit, the Munich Satellite Navigation Summit, or Space Tech Expo Bremen.
Thanks a lot, Anna, and thanks a lot also, Steve, for having invited me for today. Good afternoon, or for US colleagues, good morning, everybody. Super glad to be here. We recently joined as members, and Anna is already known to me since almost 2-3 years already.
Yeah, quite a lot of time.
We already had several discussions. So the more I'm happy to be here today and to talk a bit about legal aspects of quantum technologies. As you heard from Anna's short and kind introduction, in principle, I'm more a space lawyer. I'm now working since 27 years in the space industry, and within our law firm, I'm also leading our space and satellite team. So that is really my focus point, and it's also how I came across first with quantum several years ago, when the first ESA and EU quantum key distribution projects took off, and tenders were going on. So we already saw this and became very interested, and also started to look a bit into the quantum technologies and in fact, I also wrote a book chapter in a German book on quantum industry almost 2.5 years ago. And when I started to do the research for legal materials and other articles and publications and so on, in fact, I realized that there was, at least 2.5 years ago, there was really nothing. There was one very high-level paper from Harvard Law School, a little bit of website text, but no, even in English, German, nothing really on the legal side. I'm not sure whether this has changed a lot. So from the lawyer side, I think it's even more emerging than it is already from the science, technology, and market point of view. And of course, we don't have yet, maybe not sure whether one day we'll have something like quantum law. Is a lot of cross-cutting topics, and that is also what you will see in the presentation. I have designed it a bit more from a European perspective, clearly, but I think the US colleagues will also find themselves. And it's also a bit more for, let's say, younger, smaller companies. Big organizations, public and commercial, of course, they have their strategy, policy, governmental relations, legal, contractual departments. So they should be quite aware and also capable of dealing with all the different topics we will cross in the presentation. However, if we are talking about startup companies, small companies, smaller organizations, that may be different. So that's a little bit the focus point. And without further ado, let's start. Of course, some very well-known statements to you as the experts, but nevertheless, I think it's again important to highlight that quantum technologies are still emerging. They require a lot of R&D pre-investment. They have very high strategic relevance for states. Yeah, you will find quantum mentioned in all the, let's say, science, technology, and industrial strategies, competitiveness strategies, be it on national level, EU level, in the US, in China, everywhere. And it is now considered a factor, key factor of future national competitiveness. And of course, we also have quite a lot of military and security use cases, which also impact on, let's say, the legal topics. Yeah, clearly over the last years, governments, but also international organizations, UN and others, are recognizing the potentials of quantum, but also increasingly the dangers, namely in the realm of security and privacy. If we look to the legal side, quite a lot of certain key questions, key areas are already regulated. Here, of course, again, EU focus. We have cybersecurity legislation, the NIS2 directives, the CER directive on critical infrastructures. They are just in the process of being implemented into national laws of the member state. Of course, if we look to data protection, we have the famous GDPR. AI, we have the also quite not so recent AI Act. And of course, other more standard areas like public procurement and so on, and the law of research subsidies, these are regulated areas anyway. So one of the key questions, and also if we look to some existing papers and discussions and legal materials, why do we need something like a quantum law, or quantum acts in the future? Are there really new, very specific technology-related questions which require also a dedicated regulation, or can we deal with the existing laws and regulations which we have in relevant areas? We will come back a bit later because the EU is reflecting and even already preparing for a quantum act. We will see what that brings and whether it is in the sense a regulation as we might think of. That's a bit later. In any case, and also similar to space and other, let's say, intensive R&D, deep tech areas, we are very much dependent on public money, both for procurement and R&D support. And let's say in line with the strategies and policies, we see also quite massive increases of public funding going into quantum technologies. And just here, a rather recent also graph, which shows how these public and private investments also are developing also in the major countries and regions. What we also see is that now we are moving also from overall science technology strategies into more dedicated, really quantum initiatives, strategies, etc. We have seen on the EU level a few months ago a publication of quantum strategy, and similar developments we also see in the US, National Quantum Initiative Act and etc., Quantum Network Infrastructure Workforce Development Act, and so on and so on. So it's already ongoing since a few years, but still intensifying. That let's say we have on strategy and policy level, but also going into legislation, an increasing focus on quantum technologies. There is, if you look to these documents, there's surprisingly little on, let's say, legal regulatory aspects. The only real document I've personally found, which has quite something inside, comes from the UK and dates from February last year. In fact, here by the Regulatory Horizons Council, and they published a report on quantum, and that is very interesting from my lawyer perspective, because at least as far as I have seen, it's the only public, more strategy document which has quite a lot of reflections on in legal and regulatory aspects. So that's certainly, whoever is interested in this should have a look. No, it touches intellectual property, but also procurement, standardization, and of course also cybersecurity, and so on and so on. So quite interesting. Yeah, now after that little introduction, let's have a look to certain topics. One is, of course, coming directly from the dependency on public funding and its public procurement. No, and here we see also a lot of similarities with the space industry, which makes it also for me quite interesting. And it is typical if a new technology, an emerging sector, is so strongly dependent on governmental funding. If we look to European level, that is of course going along with complexities, because we don't have one single procurement law. We have the EU itself. If EU bodies like European Commission, EU agencies are procuring, they are working under the EU financial regulation, which has the dedicated chapters for the procurement laws and regulations by EU entities. Then we have 27 member states with a harmonized procurement law. And we have specific organizations such as ESA, as an intergovernmental organization, who again have their own procurement laws. And we may have NATO, we may have CERN, and so on and so on. So here in our European ecosystem, we find quite a lot of intergovernmental organizations with their own rules. So in fact, it's at least 3 major, but potentially even more, different procurement rules, which makes it very difficult to deal with, because even if they are similar, they are all different and self-standing. And for startup and small companies, public procurement procedures are always burdensome. You have to identify the tenders. You have to prepare all the forms and annexes and everything, and technical proposal, financial proposal, etc., etc. And there are also, let's say, often procurement conditions which make it specifically difficult for startups and small companies. We know requirements for financial capacity. This is usually expressed in minimum annual revenues. So companies or participants must show that over the last 3 years they had at least 5 million of revenues or more. A number of reference projects. Of course, if you're young, well, you're lacking these reference projects. IP in public procurement is typically going to the public customer, which is also not so easy. And at least for security and defense related projects, we may also have limitations on the participation and eligibility conditions regarding, let's say, shareholding. So that it's not only sufficient that you are based within the European Union, but you have beyond that also requirements that your majority shareholding must be within the EU, or let's say in the US, it's quite similar. Yeah. So and we see this on EU level since a few years. This is increasing and decreasing due to new policies like sovereignty, autonomy, and all these political lead and buzzwords. And one of the effect is that we see more and more procurements where these special eligibility and participation conditions are applied. Some years ago, it was only very high security military projects. Now it's much broader, and it's even further increasing. So that is something which can make life quite difficult. Another very similar topic in space and quantum, to my understanding, is the governments, the public actors being anchor customer. No? This is in fact coming from the US, and the original term is anchor tenancy, and it comes very much from the space sector, but is now also used in other similar sectors. And we see it here. It's also in the EU quantum strategy. I highlighted the respective quotes. Public procurement will be a key tool to drive early adoption and create first market opportunities. The Commission will support innovation-oriented procurement schemes, launch customers for quantum-enabled solution, and ready to act as first movers, no? As first institutional buyers, sending a strong signal to markets and investors. This is all who knows that anchor tenancy, anchor customer. This is exactly the motivations and key elements of this approach. That in fact, by starting early, when products and services may not yet be mature, where markets are still not established, but the public customers are already, let's say, risk-taking enough to already use public procurement and to give confidence to the companies and to also push the market by public procurement. And that is a key aspect. And while there is a lot of talk, no, we will have to see whether this really leads to practical spending and to what extent. But at least the planning, as we see from the EU quantum strategy, is there. Then moving from procurement to R&D support, there is, of course, also a lot of national funding, but also EU funding within the currently Horizon Europe, or overall the EU research program, including also the more defense-related, what we call the European Defense Fund. This can be, of course, an important source for income, for revenues. On the other hand, we have very long cycles for call for proposal, evaluation, award, and the start of the project. So it takes sometimes more than a year between proposal and well, if you win, the project starts. So let's say it's slow money making. Also, the IP rules typical for research project, that you have to share IP among the consortium partners, that IP created within the project may become joint IP and so on. This may also create some boundaries. And as already mentioned, also in R&D funding, we see increasingly eligibility participation limitations, especially if we talk about security and defense, but also going beyond. Namely, the European Defence Fund has special rules for participation, but also for security and dissemination. So those of you who are well familiar with the Horizon Europe general R&D framework and now have an interest in the European Defence Fund, be careful, because there are really some key differences in that special programs.
You can join the COSEC-DEF community to watch the full version of this and over 80 other lectures on quantum technologies, attend events, receive free training, and more. COSEC-DEF is a users community working to forward quantum secure communications. The community is represented by Quantum Security and Defense that provides supply chain orchestration and consulting services on behalf of our members. Find out more. Google quantumsecuritydefense.com today.